between experts about strengthening the cyber resilience of critical infrastructure. And I think it's something that touches upon all of us and the work of all of us, particularly as we are all working to enhance cybersecurity, to enhance cyber resilience, and our critical infrastructure, those services, those infrastructure that is essential to the functioning of our societies, is the first that we often talk about when we talk about cybersecurity. Today I have with me distinguished speakers that all from their own perspectives have particular expertise, a particular experience that they are glad to share with you today. Myself, I'm Manon Blanc. I'm coordinator for cyber issues at the European External Action Service. I'm very happy today to moderate the panel. But before we start with the discussions, I'm happy to invite you a keynote speaker for the day, who will introduce the remarks introduce the remarks of the colleagues, and will be able to really get us into the topic and to the discussions of today. May I introduce to you Professor Nyi Khuhakongkit, who's a Ghanaian academic, engineer and entrepreneur, and who is significant contributions to the field of information and communication technologies, particularly in Africa. And he's often referred to the father of the internet in Africa, which I think says enough for his expertise into this field. So may I welcome you indeed to the stage to give your opening remarks.
Thanks very much for the kind introduction. And also thanks for inviting me to share some remarks and maybe help frame some of the ideas of the session, appropriately titled Strengthening Resilience of Critical Infrastructure. And of course, we are speaking about cyberspace with critical information infrastructure of the internet. I'm so happy to see many friends who I normally meet overseas here in Accra, so naturally I should take the opportunity to welcome you, and as we say, Awawa Tu or Akwaba. I was fortunate to have championed internet adoption in Ghana and connected Ghana to the internet very early from 1992 and developed the GH domain name registry, a critical infrastructure, in 1995. And this was well before deregulation of the telecommunications sector in 1996. That was a period of can-do. We felt at the time that the internet's potential contribution to social, scientific, and economic development would be immense, and described our initiative in context of techno-liberation and self-development. We proceeded to help each other in country and outside. Today's cyberspace has become a new arena of dominance and control, and we have to think of resilience with similar passion and determination as in the pioneering age. We have to strive to be part of the supply chain and not only the art users. The world is increasingly connected, and there's no doubt we have a shared digital future. Cooperation nationally, regionally, and globally would be important in deriving the shared benefits and make progress on international security and stability. The SDGs will not be attainable without attention to critical infrastructure. Oftentimes, the SDGs depend on critical infrastructure, and resilient infrastructure would have positive contribution. As the session will be deliberating on policies, tools, and mechanisms that need to be put in place at national level to strengthen cyber resilience of critical information infrastructure, here are some suggestions. With private sector, governments, academia, and users as actors, we should explore how community decision-making process might be achieved. The best practice is to employ the bottom-up multi-stakeholder decision processes and which approach would enable the critical infrastructure operators to develop shared understanding and practices. While the multi-stakeholder approach is very good, we also know how difficult it is to implement in a predominantly top-down context of Africa. Without active participation, the community decision process may be readily captured. The multi-stakeholder decision process ought to be based on merit and by consensus, what we can live with priority given to addressing the immediate local needs or issues. A failure of the multi-stakeholder approach around critical infrastructure decisions can be problematic, leaving decisions in hands of a few. Perhaps the intended capacity building efforts might include appreciation of the multi-stakeholder approach and how to dutifully practice it as a coordination vehicle. We ought to distinguish this approach from traditional consultation. What we want is the community to address issues and then make decisions for itself, as opposed to someone has decided and comes to consult. The rapid technological advancement comes with varying cybersecurity risks and management. Among lessons that can strengthen the resilience of critical information infrastructure in our environment in Ghana and perhaps the global south is quality of education of the workforce and the foundation across the public and private sectors. Essential are strong foundation in cryptography and the ability to follow newly emerging technologies, especially as an example, AI models, which not only enlarge the cybersecurity problem space, but also yields technical resources for attacks, which we have to defend. This will take some effort and time with sustained investment in the region. In conclusion, one would point to the need to not be tempted to restart afresh, but to build on existing ecosystems. We shall have to develop a community to retain such knowledge and grow it communally and locally and spread globally, just like the internet. The internet technical institutions I'm associated with, such as the NIC, AfriNIC, the NOGs, AFNOG, the RENS, Research Education Networks, the CERTs, the registries, the registrars are supporting internet ecosystem for this effort. Considering some institutions would be young and are yet to mature their operational procedures and practices, people should be trained to follow processes and document their work. We need tools, but dependence on tools without being contributors to new tools would be bad for the global south. What capacity to make tools would we be liberating? Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for these introductory remarks and for sharing your knowledge and experience with us today in view of the panel discussion. I'm trying to find out how long I have because I know that the timings are shifting a bit today. But in any case, I would like to start by introducing the panelists of our panel today and then to kick off with the discussions around the protection of critical infrastructure and how we can strengthen that. Let me first introduce Hoda Al-Khzaimi. She's a current research assistant professor at the University Abu Dhabi and director of the Center of Cybersecurity in New York University Abu Dhabi. She's also the co-chair of the World Economic Forum Global Cybersecurity Future Council on Cybersecurity, and she's director and founder of the NYU Center for Emerging Advanced Research Acceleration for Technology. So I'm so happy that you're here today. I'm very proud that you have been able to join us and to share your expertise. Then Claudio. Claudio is currently ambassador for cyber matters in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Dominican Republic. Claudio Miguel Castillo, the most beautiful name I've ever heard. and he's been in the National Police for 35 years and is a general since 2006. He has shaped the approach to cybercrime in the Dominican Republic and internationally. And we all know him, or most of us know him also as the representative of the Dominican Republic, both in the Open-Ended Working Group, UN First Committee process, as well as also in the negotiations on the Cybercrime Treaty. So thank you very much for being here today. Then Paul Timmers, he's professor at Leuven University and European University Cyprus and research associate at the University of Oxford. He's in the advisory board of the EU Cyber Direct, a project that indeed we run to promote cyber diplomacy around the world. And he was a director at the European Commission, where he led the work on the first cybersecurity and digital identity laws and funding programs, work for digital health, smart cities, and e-governance. And he still regularly also advises governance in this context. And then finally, last but not least, Air Vice Marshal Jadet Khuhakongkit is the Assistant Secretary General at the National Cybersecurity Agency of Thailand. In his role, he assists governments, agencies, regulators, critical information infrastructure organizations, and sectoral CERTs in adopting cybersecurity policies, code of practices, standards, and guidelines to comply with Thailand's Cybersecurity Act. And he's also the Deputy Director of Thailand's Computer Emergency Response Team, Thai CERTs. Thank you very much for joining us today. Maybe let's kick right off and go into the discussion, but let's start basically with setting the stage on what are we talking about? What is the threat landscape? What are the threats that we're talking about when it comes to the protection of critical infrastructure? And what is actually the necessity not only to outline these threats, but also to outline the visibility on the status quo on your critical infrastructure protection. And maybe, Hoda, may I ask you to kick off the discussion?
Thank you so much, Manon, and thank you so much for the organizer for inviting all of us to head on a very critical conversation in here. So let me start by understanding what is the cost landscape for these attacks. If we looked at the attacks that are being targeted for critical infrastructure, we're facing, according to World Economic Forum on Critical Infrastructure report, a potential loss of $400 billion. And this, if we manage to have a coordinated, orchestrated attack, then it could be manifesting into an increase of $2.4 trillion of loss of infrastructure assets, which is around 5% of a global GDP. So we're standing to a loss of 5% of a global GDP on critical infrastructure, and with today's, sophisticated attack scale that are available globally, we're not just worried about the digital aspects of critical infrastructure or cyber attacks, but the hybrid infrastructure cyber attacks. I'm sure you all witnessed what happened to the global giant in Saudi Aramco when they were targeted by drone attack their gas infrastructure. And then we also had witnessed in 2022 a mass attack on the gas as well pipeline in the US and in the shipping value chain, that critical infrastructure that affected the shipping the shipment industry in the US as well. Whenever one of those attacks happens, there is a mass paralysis to the ecosystem that exists, a mass paralysis to the stakeholders that are also dependent on this ecosystem. So we have to understand that it's not just an attack on that critical infrastructure, but on the subsidiary dependent of stakeholders that are reliant on the infrastructure itself. With the mass as well call that exists globally that we have to digitalize everything, we are running into a single point of failure or vulnerability, introducing new vulnerabilities to the critical infrastructure, because we are promoting to smart cities component to exist, to IoT infrastructure to be used, to 5G networks to be as well used across the mass, which will move toward introducing more and more of applications of critical infrastructure. So when we are looking at the landscape threats, we have the ransomware attacks that exist on critical infrastructure. We have the denial of service that I've just mentioned when it comes to attacking key assets that exist on those critical networks, which takes the mass. And we have also attacks that leads to a loss of data and loss of assets across the different platforms. So I'll leave it to here.
Thank you very much, Hoda. And that seems like we have a big problem, as you outlined, 5% of the global GDP, that's quite a lot. Maybe I can ask to give everyone a bit of comfort here in the room for both Claudio as well as Jadet to outline a bit what is your national approach to this, what is your national reflection, but also what are you doing to actually counter these threats against critical infrastructure. So Claudio, may I ask you to start?
Thank you, Manon. Well, I think that on the one hand, for good or for bad, we all share the same threats. Threats are global. Cyberspace knows no borders. It is global, and we've been struggling with that in the side of the jurisdiction. But then again, in the side of cybersecurity, in the side of cyber resilience. In the case of Latin America and the entire region, we've had the good thing that it has been growing really fast. We have been improving a lot into digital services, into the adoption of technology, which means that we've increased the platform attacks. So these threats are ever increasing in our region, and that's the case of the Dominican Republic. So I think that even though we have also evolved in cybersecurity, the challenges that we are seeing in the region and that we're seeing in the Dominican Republic are, on the one hand, our financial, are the availability of resources to be able to be properly equipped, but also in the workforce scenario, in the workforce side, we have an increasing need for more qualified people. We can solve that or sort that out through all the capacity building programs that are out there, and then the challenge is the retention of that workforce, because you train the staff and then you end up losing it to the private sector. And like Lina said in a previous panel, if they stay in the country, that is good, but still you need to replace that. So you need, one of the things that is, I think, a challenge is that we need to make that capacity building an everlasting process. It should be sustainable, so you keep producing the people. So that's on that side. On the other hand, then you have the legislative and regulatory challenges that we have. For instance, our national cybersecurity strategy was adopted by presidential decree, and there's another decree that establishes the obligation for critical infrastructure, private critical infrastructure operators to report incidents, to report vulnerabilities, and so on. But we are now trying to make that into a law. There's a draft bill on a cybersecurity bill, because that mandatory reporting has no consequences if they don't comply. So that's part of also the challenge that we need to develop adequate frameworks, adequate regulatory frameworks in order to have, let's say, an ecosystem that will play well with each other.
Thank you. Jadet, may I ask you?
Okay. In terms of the cyber threat, we also have the same situation with other countries around the world. NCSA and ThaiCert, we need to monitor the cyber threat happen to the government agency and CII organization. We found that this year we have a report from organization more than 1,700 cases happen in Thailand. It twice based on the previous year. So in terms of the threat, I quite agree that it's increasing very rapidly, and it's very challenging to us. We need to work closely with CII organization and regulator and sectoral research to try to let them build up their own cybersecurity capability to protect their own asset. And more than that, we are building up the National Cyber Incident Response Plan because when the incident happen at the national level, we want to be sure that we can work with related organizations together as a national force to fight with the cyber threat. There.
Thank you. That's very interesting. And we might pick up on this incident response plan later and how to indeed further work in this context cross community, whole of government approach and really try to tackle that complexity of addressing threats against critical infrastructure. Maybe I could bring Paul into this, knowing him also from the European Commission and really starting the work there on cybersecurity and on creating this community to protect critical infrastructure in the EU. Can you maybe elaborate a bit on the work that you have done and where the EU is now in this context?
Yeah, with pleasure and the honor to be here. And I must say I also learn a lot talking to everybody, to various people here. When I look back over the past 10, 12 years of cybersecurity, I have both a little bit of an internal view and an external view. So perhaps that's a good moment to talk a little bit about lessons learned. When we started the work on 2010, 2011, 12 on cybersecurity in the European Commission, and we developed together with our colleagues in international relations and other departments in the Commission a common strategy, the first cybersecurity strategy, we were actually a little bit late. We were certainly not the first because there was already the US and UK and France and Germany had already work going on. So the first thing we actually did is simply read up on what they are doing and thinking about it, what could it mean for a really modern, up-to-date cybersecurity strategy? And I think that still holds today the way you would do it. Now, at that time, we had an idea that cybersecurity was pretty serious, but not as serious as 2.4 trillion. I think we were talking about probably 50 to 100 billion. But anyway, we thought it would become very important, and that certainly you had to address various aspects: cybercrime, international collaboration, cybersecurity in the military and defense, and of course industrial capacity, but also in particular critical infrastructures and cyber resilience. And so a key element in that strategy was also to develop a law, the Network and Information Security Directive, which was really about the resilience of critical infrastructures. And it was, the core of it was actually, it was risk management based. So it was the idea that the operators of these critical infrastructures would do proper, up-to-date, state-of-the-art risk management. And then on top of that, you would have national plans, and on top of that, you would have European-wide collaboration. For example, for incident management. So one of the things that people realized fairly early, an incident doesn't stop at the border. And if there's something serious happening, you will have to work together across several countries and certainly in the EU together, but also internationally. Now, when I look at what happened in the field about critical infrastructures, then in particular, what we kind of learned is that there are many more critical infrastructures than we initially thought. Initially, it was just a very limited set. There was something in telecoms and something in water and something in transport and electricity. And we had a big debate whether any of these digital services, including social networks, would actually have to be part of the critical infrastructures. And I still remember that as European Commission, we had put social networks in there as a critical infrastructure. And the majority of the member states and the European Parliament thought that that should not be part of that. And the day that we discussed it was actually an incident that someone had spoofed on Twitter, Obama. And the stock market dipped for a minute. So someone must have been making some money out of that. But nevertheless, they still decided not to include social networks in it. 5 years later, the realization had struck home that cybersecurity is actually much more serious than we thought. It's much wider spread. There are many more critical infrastructures. And now, in an update of the law, for example, waste management, food is in there, social networks are in there. So many more areas are covered. And also that you have to have more than only prescription that says that you need to do risk management. You need to actually also provide real support what risk management actually means. And so now the direction of travel is that there is support and understanding of toolkits and assessment frameworks to do risk management. And there is also, in addition, the idea that you would do both horizontal risk management, so this is across all of the sectors, how they have to do the reporting, how they have to do their proper assessment, but also sectoral ones, so vertical risk management frameworks. And the idea is that, as you just said, things are becoming hybrid. So if you are in a particular sector, you don't, like electricity, you don't only want to talk about, let's say, cyber incidents, you also want to talk about physical incidents. So your cyber protection and your physical protection belong together. And then you get all these kind of things of, are you consistent? Do you have the same way of measuring, so to say, what is happening in the cyber field as in the physical field? Do you report to two authorities or to one authority? Do you have the same requirements for reporting? Do you have the same fines if something goes wrong? So the steps that are being taken now is actually to try to go both horizontal, so across quite a number of sectors, vertical, like electricity, health, transport, other sectors, as well as to give very practical kind of guidance, which the cybersecurity agency in Europe, ENISA, is giving, like a toolkit. How do you do actually risk assessment when you are inside a company? What are the threats? How serious are they? How likely are they? What is the impact, etc.? Those kind of things. So it's becoming kind of quite extensive and quite hands-on. And I must say, it's all based upon a long process of people working together. That's the essence of it.
Yeah, definitely, indeed. I mean, I think as EU, we're used to sit together 27 and to discuss and agree and on cybersecurity. That it has been a practice, certainly in different formats, at both a technical level, operational level, strategic level, to really try to bring together all those layers of cybersecurity policy into legislation or into best practice. May I ask maybe Claudio to pick up on this, also giving the understanding, I mean, as EU, I think we have the luxury of having 27 minds coming together. I understand that, for Dominican Republic, that might be sometimes a bit more challenging indeed, as you also pointed out, to workforce challenges. How do you actually deal with those kind of challenges, and how do you as Dominican Republic pick up on some of these best practices?
Okay. Well, best practices. I think that one of the beauties of cybersecurity, of the cybersecurity ecosystem, is that it is international by nature. So we are able to learn a lot from each other, to pick up a lot of the best practices or of good practices. And in our process of building our national cybersecurity strategy, like we did 10 years before in the cybercrime arena, we started asking everyone, looking at everyone's experiences and taking these good things. So our strategy and our governance model our first strategy was adopted in 2018. We just adopted our new one last year, which is the 2030 cybersecurity strategy. So we have a model in which we put the National Cybersecurity Center in the presidency, and we have this ministry that is the Ministry of the Presidency. So it's the highest level of the. If we compare it to the concept of a prime minister, it's not the same. But the thing is that that's the minister is the chief of staff for the rest of the ministers. So that creates the pressure on other government agencies to comply with the mandate. But also, we have sitting in the board that there's a board in the council that is chaired by the Minister of the Presidency, but we have the Minister of Defense, Minister of Interior, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Attorney General, the Chief of Police, the Telecom regulator, which would be the equivalent to a Ministry of Communications, the technology, also the equivalent to the Ministry of Technology, and so on. So from the governance aspect, all those core ministries are very well aligned in the implementation of that strategy. So on that hand, we're doing very well. In another hand, we have this strategy has one pillar that is education. That and it's twofold, because it's focused on creating the workforce by implementing or promoting the creation of cybersecurity degrees, both at bachelor degrees and at master's levels. At this point, I believe we have 4 universities already that are offering cybersecurity engineering degrees and master's programs. So on that, we are creating a workforce not necessarily for the National Cybersecurity Center, but for the country, but for the private sector as well, who also needs this workforce. So that's on the, let's say, higher education part. But also another aspect that we have not implemented yet has to do with basic school, including into the curricula of elementary, even from elementary school. These first, let's say, cyber hygiene concepts to teach the kids, because our children are giving them devices from a very early age. So we need to create that consciousness on the people, because at the end of the day, for those that are systems engineers or tech guys, the problem is always at the layer 8 of the OSI model, or the thing in the middle between the chair and the keyboard. So it's a human problem. It doesn't matter how much we invest in cybersecurity technology. We can have Fort Knox. It doesn't matter whether we have adequate regulation and legislation and so on, if the people, the users, the end users, are not at a decent level of cyber hygiene, or know how to protect those credentials, how to protect themselves when they are responsible not only for their own cybersecurity but also for an organization.
Thank you, Claudio. And so what I've a bit heard from the round as far is that, okay, to tackle this cyber threat landscape, we need legislation, a whole of governance, cooperation and coordination, education awareness, situational awareness to understand the threat landscape, and risk assessments also to judge the risks based on that, international cooperation. What are other practices, or what are other instruments that tools, mechanisms that you think we should put in place, or a state should put in place when it comes to the protection of critical infrastructure? Are there particular experiences in Thailand or mechanisms that you use in this context?
I can add some information about that. 2 things. The first one is the National Cybersecurity Code of Practices and Standard Framework. Thailand developed this kind of document and published 2 years ago. And it's not only have the framework published and that's it. It's not like that. We need to work closely with government agencies and CAI organization to implement it. For example, we have the NCSA Cyber Clinic. When they try to implement the framework, they will have the question. So we let them ask us about that. We every month we set up the cyber clinic for them, and we try to answer, to explain. We gain a practitioner together to talk together about how to implement it in the field. And that is the first thing that we can do. Another thing is the National Incident Response Plan, because we all know that we cannot get rid of risks. All of them is impossible. So we need to prepare. One of the key documents for us is the National Cyber Incident Response Plan. We want to be sure that when the incidents happen at the national level, everybody needs to know their own role and responsibility. And on August this year, we just have the National Cyber Exercise. We invite more than 160 organizations, including the government agency, regulator, and CII organization to join. We want them to understand deeply about the National Incident Response Plan. So we hope that if the incident like a ransomware attack, Colonial Pipeline, happen in Thailand, we want them to understand about the process so they can do the incident response together. That's all for me.
Thank you. That's very interesting indeed. And the cooperation with the private sector is, I think, very important when it comes to critical infrastructure protection, as you say. Hoda, may I ask you to maybe add to the list first, but secondly, when it comes to the development of new technologies, is this list still valid? Is this still what we need to do? Or do we need to step up our game?
I think I would agree with Paul when he said that the list is very extensive, especially when we are building for the definitions of critical infrastructure today. What goes with one country definition does not precisely is the same for another country, unfortunately. And this is one of the disconnects that we have at the moment when it comes to understanding the volume of impact of a cyber attack on a critical infrastructure from one region to next. I've seen regions where, for example, chemical plants, automotive infrastructure, including cars and other micro-mobility devices, are included in the infrastructure. Other countries would include the social consortiums or the social structures, social media platforms within that kind of national critical infrastructure because they affect especially with the level of misinformation that is existing today on the sphere, they affect the stability, the national security and the stability of the countries. We've seen countries in Africa that has been impacted in their power, like Egypt, for example, by one single social media kind of post that was calling for a revolution in June 25th. And we will keep on seeing more and more of those kind of very elastic definitions of critical infrastructure. What we stand united upon is that critical infrastructures are the units and assets that will impact citizens once and foremost. And for emerging technology, the aspects that we're having at the moment, or the risk that we're having at the moment, is that we have a technology that is not well defined in mass in terms of impact, but it has an accelerated deployment in critical infrastructure. The Congress, for example, was pushing in the US for the possibility of applying AI or generative AI in nuclear systems or nuclear infrastructure. And you could see the manifestation of possible high-level attacks that might exist when you are, getting that level of high risk, low certainty kind of technology into mass deployment. At the moment, we don't have a control, unfortunately, over the mass deployment, global control over the mass deployment of these emerging technology, including AI systems or including, for example, quantum computing. We're talking about how the world will live after post-quantum technologies are going to manifest in the platform. We're seeing people coming and saying that they have actually post-quantum algorithms that are ready for deployment. And to me, I'm questioning that because we don't have actually quantum hardware that is ready yet. So how can you have post-quantum algorithms that are ready for deployment? And I went through this extensive debate with one of my fellow Oxford professors who have a startup company around post-quantum algorithms. And he said, but it's provably secure. And I told him how many times we had provable secure algorithms in crypto structures that we attacked. It's over 60% of the cases. You cannot tell an attacker, wait a minute, you cannot attack my critical infrastructure because my algorithms are actually provably secure. So that level of disconnect in between fiction and reality, we need to actually fix it, because it doesn't matter how many strategies we are going to build or how many initiatives we are willing to build if people are not realistic within their own implementation of the solutions. And today we are calling for people, even within the regulation structure, like why does it take a second for an attack to happen, while it takes 18 to 5 years for a regulation of emerging technology regulation. Look at for example, the current AI AU regulation that, AU is being looked upon as one of the most, mature jurisdictions that are pushing for regulation for emerging technology, but they cannot escape the traditional pathway or cycle of developing for regulation. It takes 18 to 5 years to push the regulation to market. And AI today, is growing in terms of performance development for hardware and software. It takes 2 to 3 months today to have double the size or double the acceleration of technology that you're developing for AI. Again, we need ad hoc, maybe regulations that are strong and efficient for the current, emerging technology needs. So there is a huge scale of opportunity that exists in the market. I think we are at the tipping point. The emerging technology changes that are happening globally, they are pushing us as not just cybersecurity professionals, but as scientists, researchers, cyber diplomats or cyber governance professionals, to not anymore be using our 1980s method to solve for tomorrow's problems, but to also raise for the futuristic ways of implementing for new solutions that need to hit the ground. I don't know at the moment what are these kind of solutions that we have to have on the ground. I've seen what, for example, when it comes to AI, what China have done. China have built this kind of measures that they call them AI measures, where people are going to be fined if they used AI in high-risk environment, biometrics for mass surveillance and all of these things. While other countries, they were much more hesitant in having that kind of fines and regulations being put into the ground. They have this kind of risk models, and according to the risk model, they left the freedom of exercising the solution to the different jurisdictions, which is understandable by law. But at the same time, this could be lost, because at the moment, we are not collectively approaching the problem-solving structure for this technology from, as my colleague here just said, from a holistic perspective. It shouldn't be just a technological solution, but it should be a human-centric technological solution that also accounted for social scientists, law practitioners, technology developers, scientists and researchers, to be policymakers, to be sitting together to develop the solution. If we don't do it this way, then we will be faced by a law like the current GDPR law, which I think was a great nudge for our technology ecosystem, but also it highlighted a void. We have a GDPR law that says you have the right to be forgotten on technological platform, the right not to be analyzed, but the technology providers, like the big technology providers on critical infrastructure for social media, for example, or Instagram, they will not give you that kind of assurance that you will not be analyzed on the platform, on that social media platform. You don't have a piece of technology today, algorithm, that guarantees that your fingerprint will be wiped off the platform. So I think we have a lot of disconnect in between reality and strategies and regulations that are happening, and we need to close this disconnect as soon as possible.
Thank you, Hoda. And it's very interesting, certainly from an EU perspective, as we've been at the forefront of regulating, indeed, technologies to protect citizens' rights and to ensure security in cyberspace. I mean, you spoke about the AI Act, and we will talk about that also tomorrow. But we also have the Digital Markets Act and Digital Services Act, which addresses some of these concerns that you are addressing here. Paul, maybe can I ask you to pick up on that? I mean, we spoke about the list of critical infrastructure where we need to actually invest. We spoke about the long list of measures that we need to take in order to protect the critical infrastructure, the impact of new technologies to this. Could you maybe pick up on this and see where does that take us now?
Yeah, I think that if we talk about the new technologies, we have to really talk technology by technology, because AI is really different from quantum, is different from IoT, different from 5G, 6G. But let's take the example of AI, because you're quite right. It's developing so fast that slower regulatory instruments have difficulty catching up. But fortunately, it's not only regulatory instruments that we rely upon. I mean, there's a lot of focus on that. There are laws, but there's a lot more. There are toolkits, there are guidelines, there are best practices, there are exercises, as you said. There is expert assistance. So you see now, for example, you have to count on it that AI will be everywhere. So you have the issue of the cybersecurity of AI that is used in other business operations, analyzing, for example, how you manage best your network for electricity supply. Might very well be that you're already using AI for that today, and that there are vulnerabilities in that AI. For example, data can be manipulated, the algorithms can be possibly modified, and those kind of things. And there are already today guidances appearing from several national cybersecurity authorities and intelligence authorities that are saying, this is what you have to watch for when you are using AI today or in the near future for your other business operations. This is the cybersecurity of AI. The other thing is using AI for your cybersecurity. And actually, quite likely, you're already doing that if you're running a critical infrastructure, because there's so much information coming from it. And there, too, you need to have guidance, and there's a very interesting problem there. There's a tendency to say, because AI is used increasingly by cyber criminals and perhaps others in order to orchestrate attacks and modify them very quickly, the only thing to counter those AI-triggered or AI-driven attacks is using AI. It's AI, let's beat AI with AI, that type of thing. And there's probably a lot to be said for that, but also a lot to be thought about that. Because this means that you give AI autonomy. And no law is actually capable of addressing that question. Can you give AI autonomy when it is about a critical infrastructure? It's different when you're talking about autonomy for analysis of consumer behavior. It's quite different for having AI that is starting to run your electricity network. And perhaps we cannot escape from that, but we have to think about it. What does that actually mean for the laws that we are making today that are ultimately all based upon political responsibility? And I think that's really a challenge. You know, we need other instruments. And this is an area, I think that's an area also interesting for researchers, I must say, for political scientists for sure too, but also interesting to think about it. How do you kind of perhaps push the boundaries of what you need, but not go one step too far, actually lose control?
Thanks, Paul. And I maybe ask already if someone has a question to prepare already a bit. You can raise your hand and we will pick up on the questions. First, I wanted to pick up on something that Claudio said before on international cooperation. Hearing all this, I mean, that's quite a chunk to swallow. How can all of this be incorporated in cyber capacity building, and how can also international cooperation help in this regard? I mean,
I think, like I mentioned earlier, that international cooperation and cooperation at all levels is key on this, but international especially, I think this has started to become a big family. And on the cybersecurity side, on the prevention side, we have some very good examples of CSIRT networks. For example, the CSIRT, the OAS CSIRT Americas, and then other CSIRT networks that work very well together. So that cooperation in terms of warnings, in terms of learning very quickly what's going on is very useful. In fact, even from the WannaCry attack, we were able to divert most of the traffic because we were warned by Spain when they first got hit, and we had enough time to divert most of that traffic with those indicators of compromise. So that part is key. In terms then of capacity building, we've had very good experience as well right now with EU Cybernet, for example, with the LAC4 that we have physically in Santo Domingo, but reaching the entire Latin America and Caribbean is also a very good example, not only because it reaches in terms of creating that capacity all those countries, but also because it creates, that in itself creates a lot of networking. And I think that's a very good thing. My colleague Carlos Leonardo, who's in the back there, has a very good theory about the networking that these type of events generate. We're all sitting here. Maybe you learn a couple of things, a couple of new things. Maybe you don't. But at the end of the day, what you take back home is the networking that you did here. And Carlos' theory is based on beer diplomacy. So it is more important and on what you do in the breaks, and what you do in lunches, in dinners, and so on, because that creates that. So back to projects like LAC4, we are, and like mentioned earlier also with our experience with Glacy, we are now bringing, if LAC4 forms, trains experts in Dominican Republic, and then goes, I went to Chile with them on a mission on a cyber diplomacy training for their diplomatic school. So that in itself creates that networking between the countries of people that you're bringing to other countries within the same region or between, inter-region. So I think that's one of the good experiences in cooperation in the regards of capacity building that we've had recently.
Thank you. Maybe I can ask also to the audience if there's a particular question. Maybe there's a. Sorry, I will put the mic. I see also Nathalie, but.
Thank you so much. I'm Luanda Dome. We actually have a critical infrastructure and cybersecurity group in Kosovo, where recently we have been dealing with, I think what our colleagues have said here, identifying what is critical infrastructure and CII. And we have, I think, mixed and matched different frameworks to see how that works well. But I wanted to correlate with the workforce development aspect of it. What we found difficult, and this is a multi-stakeholder group from also a private sector that could be owners of the critical infrastructure itself. It's with infrastructure that is single point of failure, or that are interdependent with other jurisdictions and countries that might not be allies or friendly and etc. Per se, so that how that affects, I think, the security of the country. And one of the things that we are finding it very difficult in terms of workforce is not training the personnel of critical infrastructure, but retaining them. A lot are actually moving to the private sector or actually becoming employees of international companies where the salaries are much more attractive and competitive in the market. So any lessons or yes.
I think you're not alone. So it's a familiar problem. Like either you're training and they're leaving, or either they're always in training. So how do we deal with this, right? So maybe Jadet, you can come in.
based on my experience, you need to accept it. We all know that cybersecurity professional, every organization need them. So they will stay with us for a short time. However, we can take care of them. We should try to not only use them, but we need to build up the team. For example, from my experience, we need to gain more people into the team. We need to prepare, and in my opinion, I think that they will stay with us around 5 years. After that, they will gone. And then we need to prepare, 5 years only. After that, we just build team, the new one come to the team, and then we continue build up the team. So when someone stay with me more than 5 years, they will go. And then we can have the new people come to my team, and enough to finish or achieve the mission.
5 years, I think many people are jealous here in the audience. So maybe, Hoda, you want to come in as well?
I think I would advocate for public-private partnerships on this. It's very important because the knowledge learning curve in cybersecurity or in this field is very particular. It's very diverse. You should be maybe a scientist coming from electrical engineering background or a law background or financial background sometimes. So this diversity of knowledge is very much needed. So what we do in our public-private partnership that I personally contributed to building over the past 20 years, multiple of these partnerships between a sovereign wealth fund, between energy companies or advanced research companies, and also the governmental constituents who are interested in building, for example, incident response team, that kind of hip-hopping approach where someone could build a knowledge in one domain and then go to another domain and build complementary knowledge and then get to another domain and build another piece of knowledge, so they can, at the end of the cycle, at the end of their 15 years of career, have that kind of 360 view of what does it take to be in the field. So instead of treating the talent as assets that you own, you are treating them as growth potentials and people who you need to invest in invest in their growth in the field. Some of them would go into PhDs and would go into very particular domain, and others they don't want that. Others they want this kind of 360 view, and they want to maintain multidisciplinary kind of knowledge. So supporting both kind of appetites is very important, and investing in public-private partnerships that allow them to get into your labs if they want, or maybe work with the government if they want, or maybe work on the policy aspects. Because at the end of the cycle, you need to close the loop, right? You don't want them just to work on one domain or one level.
Exactly, and how do we shape that cooperation with the private sector is typically a discussion that we can have at this conference here. I have a question, Nathalie, and then the gentleman before.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thanks for a great panel. My name is Nathalie Jaarsma. I'm from the Netherlands. I used to be the Dutch cyber ambassador, but I'm now more into AI. Paul, I have a question for you, and you know you always trigger me with a lot of your comments. You talked about autonomy and sort of AI systems fighting AI systems. I was wondering, perhaps you could go a little bit deeper on two aspects. How does that relate to sort of the practical situation nowadays that cybersecurity tools already use AI? Obviously in a defensive way, but sort of where do we need to draw a line? Because that is sort of what I hear, what you're saying. And the second is when we look at sort of international law, but more broadly, the normative framework for responsible state behavior, is something needed there, particularly on AI and sort of the kind of dynamic that you just described. Thank you.
Let me try to give a bit of an answer to that, not make it into an inter-Dutch dialogue. But first of all, what you do see is that now people are starting to look at how do you actually use AI when you do cybersecurity. So it's, in a certain sense, it's not kind of rocket science, because you look, for example, at the cycle of what you do for cybersecurity. Like you make an inventory of your assets, so you identify, you protect, you detect, you respond, you recover. And all of that, there's a lot of information produced during that cycle. And that's actually what is now being analyzed. How can you use that information to have that as input to a self-learning AI system? And that's kind of like improving the cycle. So I'm actually quite positive about that and optimistic about that, because that's really, you know, there will be a lot of experimentation and there will be a lot of learning that we collectively do, but actually this is really what needs to happen. Of course, the point is, how far do you then go? Do you actually want to really give AI autonomy to take that millisecond decision that may be life or death decision? And I don't know. We don't know the answer to that. So that's the trouble. The other thing is, under international law, there are, and that perhaps also comes back to the dependencies question, what do you actually kind of buy, put into your systems, and what can you expect in terms of that AI that is being provided to you? So what kind of risk assessment has to be agreed about the AI that you apply wherever, whether it's cybersecurity that affects AI or AI affecting cybersecurity. You want to know a comparison of the risk levels. And so in terms of dependency, there is already work going on to do ICT supply chain security and get things like certification. Well, certification we would like to have in some form that is internationally compatible, internationally recognized. You're not there, but so AI is kind of like the next frontier. I think actually in a wider kind of effort to assess dependencies, to do proper assessment, proper certification possibly, and perhaps also to a certain extent to opt for de-risking. Because you can't have, let's say, uncovered dependencies that are of the critical nature of the 2.4 trillion, you know, or life or death. So I think it's too early to talk here about international law, but in a certain sense we are moving into a situation where we talk about something like AI adequacy, so that there can be something like a mutual recognition of how we find AI adequate enough to be deployed into, for example, critical infrastructures.
Thank you, Paul. Indeed, the gentleman, yeah.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I would like to applaud Hoda's comment on a topic that is very much...
Can you state your name? I'm apologies.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Yes,
no
my name is Mark Herman. I'm from Red Clara, a Latin American Research and Education Network. And I really appreciate Hoda's comment on the human-centric approach of really what should be at the core of cyber capacity building. But coming back to the topic, there are certainly already some leads that have been mentioned on the work on the strengthening of resilience of the critical information infrastructure. But what about the work with blockchain, for instance? Blockchain is also a very, let's say, currently a topic in precisely for that kind of approach, for that kind of work. So because we have a lead, a work lead in a work group on that. So, thank you.
I think you have made Hoda happy because this is my question.
So finally, someone is asking about blockchain. No, I think the important aspects for us here to realize when we talk about emerging technology, we're not just talking about one technology without the other. It's a stack. And yes, it's a different type. You have different clusters. But in my opinion, they are related to each other. You have few of these technologies that could be infrastructural technologies that can disrupt everything else. To me, AI could disrupt, quantum could disrupt crypto, IoT, and different aspects. So coming back to your question, what is currently the maybe threat landscape when it comes to blockchains? We know that blockchains are in mass deployment when it comes to critical infrastructure for the fact that they are the elements that are supposed to provide integrity of different operational transactions on critical infrastructure, what Paul referred to in terms of automating when you talked about, for example, automating AI to AI system responses, to me, blockchain could be one of these components that would, for example, issue these transactions and verify these interactions in between the different players. But at the same time, we need, again, to be realistic and have a full awareness of this. I talk to many people who think that blockchains are the silver bullet that is secure and safe. That's not the reality. We don't have 100% secure systems. Our security is always partial. So you need to investigate, do your own due diligence about what type of blockchain you're using, what kind of attack that blockchain was exposed to. I know certain level of attacks has been patched on different networks, but others are still surviving. What we're trying to advocate for here across the different deployments of blockchain is we really are telling people to just hire their in-house development team. I mean, we have an issue with people who are always using these third-party components, and then they're saying, we are okay. Also, some of the blockchain exchanges, for example, would use, the crypto exchanges will use blockchains. And they would tell you, we don't need cryptographers in-house. We have our own system developers that they're building our systems, they're building our security, it's fine. We have our own protocols, and they don't understand that unless your system developer would also have a bit of information about how they are implementing the crypto, they will not understand the level of attacks that are coming from that kind of paradigms. And if that attack hits your infrastructure, it means it will disrupt everything that you think of in your blockchain or your whatever stack. So I think in today's day and age, you need to have your own people that would do your own R&D and within your own infrastructure, being blockchain or any other kind of system, for you to build that level of resiliency that we are talking about today.
Thank you, Hoda. Maybe also looking at the time and noting that we have 4 to 5 minutes left, may I maybe ask each of the panelists, so looking at the discussion that we had today, we spoke about the list of critical infrastructure and the threats against critical infrastructure and how also new technologies are impacting both our ability to defend, but at the same time also accelerating these threats. We discussed a list of tools and mechanism measures to address the resilience of critical infrastructure. But if we would now look at capacity building, and I'm a state, I'm getting into this business. I have some mechanisms in place. What are the essentials to you that should be put in place to strengthen the resilience of your critical infrastructure? What would be the one, I mean, okay, fine if you have 2, but what would be the one thing that you would say, okay, please do that? Jadet, can I start with you?
Okay, I will choose one. As an NCSA perspective, we need to protect the government agency and CII organization from cyber threat. So one of the most important for me that we want the government agency and CII organization to do is about the risk management process. In Thailand, we use the framework from NIST, cybersecurity framework. We follow the NIST Special Pub 839 and 37 about the risk management process because it's quite flexible to use in both small organization and the complex organization. So my answer is the risk management process, that flexible.
Risk management. So, Paul.
Difficult question.
How can I choose?
So I would say that, of course we have learned a lot over the years how you do capacity building, how you do proper risk management. So you need to have your foundations right. You need to have it under your feet, so to say. You need to do exercises because you need to have it in your fingers. You need to really learn from others and then try to understand so that you get it in your mind. But probably the most important in a certain sense is this trust building. so that you kind of get it in your heart. Because, you know, the police doesn't want to work together with the cybersecurity authorities and don't want to work together with the military, but you need to have all of them getting together. And one country doesn't want to work together with the other country, so the end result is that they are both weaker, so they need to build trust that they can actually work together. All of these kind of things, so I think capacity building is a two-way street, building trust.
Bring in the beer diplomacy by Carlos, I understand, but then cross-community, so...
So to me, I think we need to redefine how we do understand capacity building. It should be equitable access to all of the necessity tools, global equitable access to all of the necessary tools that would allow you to build advanced cyber competencies. So access to science and technology that would enable nations across the globe to build their own advanced emerging technology components is important to me. I think it shouldn't be only one country building LLMs and the rest of the universe using it, one country building quantum and the rest of the universe is using it. It should be everybody else building their own local competence towards building the hardware and software for this, because we need to understand how can we build it for that company. And also making sure that we don't lose agency. I think we are automating everything else, making sure that AI is overtaking the world somehow, and we might use the element of human agency. When we are talking about de-escalating cyber risks, there is a huge power that exists within the negotiation structure of human agency. And somehow we need to advocate for cyber diplomacy across different nations, and this kind of exercise where people should come together in order to escalate or to de-escalate the cyber risks that exist should persist.
Thank you. And I think that building capacities of the private sector is a debate in and of itself. I think we could get a whole other hour starting on this. So, Claudio,
I think if I had to choose one single subject to start a capacity building project in one beneficiary country, if I understood the question correctly, it would probably be the regulatory, normative, and legal framework design. I think that should be like the base. If we don't do that right, then we have a risk all the way up. So that would be the one subject that I would recommend like as a starting point of capacity building.
Thank you very much. And I thank you very much for being here today and for joining the panel and for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us, and for you all to join in and listen in and for asking the questions. And please give a round of applause to all the panelists.